Hello, I'm Anawoltos, and today I'm going to be talking about communal liberty. And what do I mean by communal liberty? When I refer to communal liberty, what I refer to is the liberty or the freedom of a community to decide its own social and economic policies and to freely associate with other communities within the same state. And therefore, I believe that such a liberty is something that I believe is very rare in most government systems, to the point where I would say is largely absent, because usually there is a tendency for governments to have at least some degree of centralization or regionalization, as opposed to allowing for communal liberty and communal rights. Now, one may ask, what is the difference between this and, let's say, libertarianism or minarchism? The difference here is that it is distinct from minarchism because the presumption is not that this local power is significantly limited, but rather that the limitation of this is based upon the community itself regulating how limited they want their government to be. In essence, as opposed to libertarianism, where there is an emphasis on individual liberty. If you have an emphasis on communal liberty, there may be a possibility to have a large degree of individual liberty, or perhaps a smaller degree of individual liberty, really depending on the needs and decisions of the community. Now, that being said, what I'm not saying is that in my particular system, that the rights of the individual would become subordinate to the rights of the community. That's not what I'm saying. In fact, I would say that there are a particular series of rights that the individual would need to have in order to make the system efficient and well-functional and to minimize corruption, and to also make it competitive, because by having multiple communities deciding their own economic and social policies, what you have essentially is a situation where there are different systems operating in parallel to each other, and they will be competing economically. And ultimately, this leads for a survival bias and a natural selection for systems that are workable and reliable. So, in order to ensure that this works, there are a few rights that people should have. So, first of all, I would say that democracy on the local level is important, on the communal level, in the sense that individuals should be collectively deciding the particular structure of their communal government and how that communal liberty is exercised. Not in the sense that individuals would necessarily have to vote on every law in a direct democratic fashion, but more so in the sense that individuals would have to have, in their local governments, be allowed to vote for positions that are elected positions, and every position that is not an elected position would have to be a position that is appointed by an elected position and is replaceable at any time by that electable position, so that the entirety of the government, if need be, can be replaced. In functionally speaking, this leads to a highly democratic system, but also due to the locality of the system, it means that individuals will have good warrant to believe that their government is party to their particular economic and social interests due to the locality and approachability of the leadership, because if, let's say, the leadership is in a faraway location, it would be a lot less easy to hold the leadership accountable, especially if that leadership is then expected to make economic and social decisions regarding local policy. An example would be that I would not necessarily trust an individual on one end of the country to be fully aware and to make informed decisions regarding economic occurrences on the other end of the country. And therefore, in my opinion, it doesn't make sense for in a democratic system for individuals to be voting for um, the exact economic state of regions that those individuals do not live in. So it makes a lot more sense to me that this should be decentralized to a communal level. And when I say local, particularly for those in the United States who very frequently have misunderstood me when I speak and I say the word local, I do not mean a state in the United States, because a state, essentially, when referring to places other than the United States, is generally considered to be a country to itself. And the word state, therefore, does not imply locality. In fact, it implies the opposite, which is that it is a high level of government. But what I'm saying is that it should be on the low level of government, because this ensures that the interests of the people within the community are met the easiest due to the accountability and the reachability and the locality of the leadership. Now, what I'm saying is that individuals can indeed have a more direct democratic system if that is the system that they decide to enact in their locality. But on the same token, I would say that individuals should not be able to vote on economic and social policy affecting other parts of the country. But anyway, so the first individual right here is of course, the right to vote in these communities. The second one, which comes out of the first one, is of course the right to have a free speech regarding at least politics within such a community. And what do I mean by that? In essence, what I mean is that in order for the community to function and to have a capable and informed votership, it makes sense that individuals should be able to speak honestly about political situations so that they can make persuasive arguments if there is need for a change. And therefore, I believe that free speech is essential in order to make this system work as well. Another right that people should have, or liberty in essence, would be that of free association with communities. In essence, meaning that if an individual feels that the community is moving in a direction that the person is uncomfortable with, the person is allowed to leave that community and join another community. However, at the same time, I would say that communities would therefore also have the right to choose whether or not to let an outsider into the community. And this is to perhaps protect the integrity of the community and to ensure that the community does not get corrupted due to, let's say, a hostile takeover caused by perhaps mass immigration, which I would say that immigration would then therefore also be linked with allowance to membership of a particular community, as opposed to just generally allowing someone to enter into the state as a whole. So that's another issue. Another important element, I believe, would be that in order to ensure that there's at least a general degree of morality enforced, there needs to be a responsibility placed upon these governments that they enforce or at least punish particular crimes. Now, the exact definitions and how much they are willing to enforce them, in my opinion, should therefore be up to the local government, because different communities may have different views on what is the most appropriate punishment for a particular crime. But these crimes, let me just list the ones that I think are important. So, of course, murder, assault, rape, vandalism, and theft. Those are all very physical things. that individuals can commit, and therefore I do not believe that most people would have any problem with considering those things that should be enforced in every jurisdiction. Now, as I said earlier, the jurisdictions would therefore also be allowed to define with a certain degree of latitude as to what exactly they consider these to be. Because, of course, I'm well aware that there are certain individuals that will go around saying taxation is theft, and I just want to give the government the option to say, no, it's not. But anyway, I would also say that there are certain things that are not necessarily physical actions, but that for the good function of society should also be considered to be crimes. So these would be fraud, of course, and there would also be perjury, and additionally threatening to commit a crime, conspiracy to commit a crime, and breaking an official contract. Those are 5 crimes that are not necessarily done in a physical sense, but more deal with how information is transmitted, except for maybe breaching a contract. But those also need to be punishable to a particular degree. Now, other things such as how severe a government wants to consider libel and things like that, the government can decide whether or not they want to have particular laws on that. Now, because this is based on local communities, it will be more difficult for libel to be effective. But I still think that if a government wants to punish libel, they can. If they don't want to, they don't have to. So essentially, those are 10 crimes, the 10 commandments that the Central Constitution gives down, that these are 10 things that each local community should have on their books as being punishable. Now, speaking about things being punishable on their books, the other guarantee that the local community should have is that all things that the local community enforces are things that have to be in a written legal code. This means that laws cannot be changed on the fly, and that enforcement of law is consistent, and that jurisprudence is well established, so that if an outsider were to have let's say, an arbitration between 2 parties in 2 different communities, that they would be able to look at the legal code in both communities to get a full picture of the law, instead of having to rely on tradition or perhaps the not so stable ideas of legal precedent. So in my opinion, I think that the civil code should be something that does exist. But other than these things, the local government should have a large degree of latitude in doing this. It would, of course, also have to capitulate to arbitration from higher levels of government. However, by having these higher levels of government, the way I would exercise the communal rights there is that the communities should therefore be able to elect the higher levels of government. And when I say the communities being the electors, I particularly refer to the communal government. In other sense, this is a sort of a layered democracy. Now, the reason why the people themselves, although being able to vote for their communities, are not able to, let's say, vote for intermediate and top levels of government, the reason why they are not able to vote for those in my system is because all their economic and social interests are entirely vested in the local or the community government, and any other issue that, such as, let's say, the larger military or the diplomacy between countries, are things that I would say most people are not really qualified to vote on. And what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is, just like individuals are largely not fully party and fully understand the exact economic situations on the opposite ends of a country, and therefore should not really be able to vote against the economic interests of individuals on the far side of a country, I believe that most individuals do not really have a unified paradigm of foreign policy, and really that the foreign policy is highly complex and should best be left to individuals that are perhaps experienced with arbitration and experienced with governance, so that such things can be decided. Now, at the same time, foreign policy would not be able to decide things that violate the community rights, the communal rights. And for example, foreign policy would not be able to impose economic unions with other countries, because that would be in violation of the communal rights. And I would say that whereas in the local government, the 10 crimes can be punished in any way the local government desires to, and they can also have additional things that they can consider to be punishable. I and they can choose not to punish with death if they don't want to. But I think that if someone, let's say, violates something constitutionally, that individual, by violating, let's say, the communal rights or the individual rights or the rights of a central state, therefore becomes an existential threat to the system as a whole, and therefore should be eliminated by a death penalty. Now, some people may consider this to be a bit of an extreme view, but I think it's only fair that this should be seen as a view, so that such things that completely disrupt the function of government are things that should be destroyed by the government in order to ensure its own continued existence and function, and so that it continue to be a benefit to those who are party to it. So ultimately, when it concerns communal rights and individual rights, that's my particular opinion. If you would like elaboration on a particular aspect of that, or perhaps if you have questions, or if you would like to discuss this with me, I would be happy to do so. Just try to get into contact with me. Now, I don't get contacted very frequently, so I might not necessarily be expecting contact. But if you really push through and pursue me, then I'm sure you can get a hold of me, and I will make the time to speak with you. So I would be happy to have a discussion on these issues with someone else. So thank you all for watching, and I will be seeing you all next time on Awiltus Over and Out.